Okay, we are live. Samsung has officially entered the smart ring market with the announcement of the Galaxy Ring. This cutting edge wearable is set to potentially revolutionize health tracking, offering a suite of advanced features like heart rate monitoring, sleep analysis, blood oxygen levels, skin temperature, and workout tracking. But does it sound familiar? Does it sound a bit like the Oura Ring and the Ultra Human Ring? We're going to be looking at the Samsung Smart Ring today and ask, is it any better than what's already out there? And see what we know about it. This is Biohacking News. Yes, hello and welcome to Biohacking News. I'm Tony White, and before we go any further, please do like and subscribe. Today's guest is Sim Landon, 8-time best-selling author, anthropologist, keynote speaker, and longevity enthusiast. And I cannot believe that we've never met in person before, Sim, but it's great to
Mhm.
have you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here and talk with you.
Yeah, well, been really looking forward to it. Today, we're going to look at Samsung entering the biohacking arena with the Galaxy Ring. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about longevity biomarkers. And obviously, I know you've been working very hard on your new book, which is on pre sale and is coming out soon. And we're also going to be looking at various other topics like how to boost generational wellness. So, Gen Zers spend far more on their health than our parents and even us lot. But how do we make sure that health passes down through the generations? So we'll do that as well. And I know you'll have plenty to say on that. But first, this Samsung Smart Ring. I first found out about this because a mate of mine said, what's going on with this Galaxy Ring? And I'm interested to compare what Samsung are offering. It's on pre-order, it's shipping this week, and what's already out there. What do you make of this news, Sim?
Mm. Yeah, so I haven't looked at the specific like what's like their software and like what kind of specs do they have for the ring. I do think that it's something that a lot of these companies will move into with Apple probably also will come out something similar, and I mean they already have the Fitbit or the Apple Watch, and yeah, it's just this kind of data tracking becomes quite mainstream in the next few years, I would imagine. And just the ring is another like form of it. I'm interested to see like how profitable is going to be for Samsung, because it's just it's an extra device that many people aren't like used to. So they're used to wearing smartwatches and they're used to wearing Fitbits or their smartphone. But yeah, interesting to see how many people will actually start using it as a ring.
Mm. I know that you're so focused on longevity, and I know your books span a lot of different areas in terms of biohacking, optimizing health, and so on. And in preparing for today's podcast and show, I know that I was looking at some of the videos that you've already recorded, looking at, for example, the Oura Ring Generation 3 and that sort of thing. There are some differences that we know about already. For example, the Samsung Ring is going to cost more,
Mm.
but there's no subscription fees, which is you and I are probably OGs, and we've been wearing this enough time that we don't get charged the fees. But anyone who gets an Oura Ring now, that's quite annoying. Those fees, isn't
Mm.
it?
Right. Yeah, I think that's an unfortunate feature of the Oura Ring. And there's things like the Ultra Human that you mentioned. I think they don't have a subscription right now. Whoop has a subscription, so I mean, subscription could potentially like reduce the barrier of entry for people to
Mm.
try it out if they don't have to buy the full thing in one payment. But with Oring, unfortunately, buy the ring and you also have to pay the subscription. So it's like worst of the both worlds in that sense. Whereas Samsung, it might cost a bit more, but it doesn't have a subscription, and the high cost might be a bit more prohibitive for a lot
Mm.
of people who want to
Yeah.
try out the Samsung Ring.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of other really interesting ones. I mean, this is going to put off a lot of people. You actually need a Samsung smartphone to use it. So if
Okay.
you've got as far as I can tell, if you've got an iPhone, you're not going to be able to use the Samsung Galaxy Ring. But as we say,
Mhm.
this is as we record, this is on pre-sale. It's going out the week that it's being sort of sent out. Design looks quite good, quite similar to the Oura Ring, the Ultra Human Ring. I certainly think for newbies to trackers, there's a real benefit to having a tracker that doesn't have a display, because let's face it, none of us need more notifications in our lives, do we?
Mm. Yeah.
And then in terms of the health metrics, it looks, I mean, it looks pretty, I can't really see much different. Um, Heart rate, sleep, blood oxygen levels, skin temperature, workouts, all of this stuff is great, but it's stuff that Oura Ring probably has already. What do you
Mm.
use to track your, I mean, I know, and we're going to get on to all the sort of tests that you do, but what do you use to track your health?
Yeah, so I do use a sleep tracker, some form of it. I have a few of them, so I'm kind of looking at all of them at the same time, kind of, or if I'm doing some tests, then I'll use a specific one. But I've used the O-ring, I've used the Whoop, I've used the Ultrahuman. I also have the 8 Sleep mattress that tracks your sleep as well. So I think it doesn't really, in my experience, I haven't found any like significant value from the subtle differences in these trackers. So some of them have maybe some differences in terms of how they track your deep sleep and REM sleep. I don't find that having been so useful in terms of, okay, it's a 5% difference in the amount of deep sleep. Like in practical value, it doesn't really change much in my everyday life. The kind of heart rate and HRV markers are actually quite similar across all of them. So I think that's one I've been using that marker mostly from the sleep tracker side to look at, okay, what's my HRV, what's my resting heart rate, what's my like body temperature. You can use those like quite convenient to know if you're catching a virus or getting sick or if you're overtraining, for example. Beyond that, then I really like some of these like traditional blood markers. I think those are pretty underrated, and they're gonna be the most clinically relevant for the risk of all these chronic diseases. And preventing and delaying chronic diseases is the key to living longer. So if you want to live to the age of 100, then you need to make sure that you don't get a heart attack in your 60s, or that you don't get some other chronic disease in your 70s and 80s. So it comes down to delaying a lot of these chronic diseases and paying attention to a lot of these very basic and very
Mm.
kind of important blood markers like hemoglobin A1C, inflammation, ApoB, cholesterol, triglycerides, even like blood pressure. Those very basic markers, they can be very useful for just tracking your health status in terms of these chronic diseases. So like you're not going to get type 2 diabetes if your blood sugar is always normal or if your triglycerides are always normal. To get type 2 diabetes, you need to be in a state of hyperglycemia and hyperlipidemia for years. And one good example of this is one of my family members who recently got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And he didn't go to the doctor for the last 10 years or something. So he
Mm.
never measured his blood markers. And if you looked at him, you wouldn't think that he's somehow sick. He was like doing physical labor and construction work. He had a little bit of a belly, so like he had probably too much visceral fat. So you wouldn't think that he has diabetes. But now in his mid 40s, he got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes because he never like looked at his blood markers. And
Mm.
if you were to go back in time, you would see that, okay, in 5 years ago, he already had quite elevated like blood sugar and lipids, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get onto that actually because certainly in the UK, there's just no culture of testing anything before you get sick. Nothing. I mean,
Mm.
even my mates think I'm weird for wearing one of these, let alone going to get some blood tests when there's nothing wrong with you. So I do want to come on to that in a sec because I know that's an area you're looking at. You very kindly sent me a copy of your new book, which I've really been enjoying and I've been making quite a few notes on it and been quite inspired by as well. Just as we round off this discussion on the new Samsung Ring, I met Dr. Matt Walker and interviewed him, and he was wearing one. And I said, "Oh, you're wearing an Oura Ring?" And he said, "Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, obviously, he's got one of the most advanced sleep testing labs in the world." And he said, it's nothing like as accurate as what we use in our lab, but it's still sort of useful to have these stats. And I guess that's where it comes in quite handy to give you a little bit of an idea, a direction, but not to be too obsessive about the stats.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like it's not going to be a perfect like the sleep tracker. You can probably find some discrepancies in your results, like you feel garbage but the ring said that you slept very good, or vice versa. So yeah, you need to take it with a grain of salt that it's not perfect technology yet. And I'm waiting for the next 20, 30
Mm.
years when we will have like this very accurate technology for a lot of different biomarkers, so you can track your not only your blood glucose, which we can do right now pretty well, but like some other biomarkers on a daily basis. So like every day you get a morning blood test from just a small amount of blood that okay, here's your cholesterol and your white blood cells and other things, and here's what you can do to like maintain it. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
future where we're heading towards. So right now it's still in its infancy, and that's why also I'm not going to be probably getting the Samsung ring, because I think they market it as like some AI based ring,
Mm.
but everyone attaches the label of AI to their products right now because it's trendy and increases the perception of the value of the product. But if you wait 5 years, then the quality of the AI is going to be 1,000 times better compared to now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I thought that when I saw the AI, you sort of think, okay, how much is the AI actually going to help? In my experience, ChatGPT is making up more and more at the moment as well. You have to be very careful with what you ask ChatGPT at the
Right.
moment.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you mentioned eight sleep. I didn't realize that. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so 8 Sleep is this mattress, like you wrap it around your mattress, and
Mm,
the main feature of it is that it's a cooling mattress, so it lowers your temperature. It's very nice. You can, go with the current version that I have is like minus 10 degrees. I think it works based on like the room temperature, so you can't make it literally chilly, freezing. But if it's you know regular room temperature, then it's gonna be still like 10 degrees cooler if you want to go that low. The new one that they published, I think that one even goes like minus 20 degrees if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you can just choose whatever temperature you prefer at, and it also has like two different sides of the bed, so your partner might want some other temperature, so they can choose which one they like. So I find it very good in the summer, definitely when it's pretty hot,
mm.
and just makes it much easier to fall asleep. In the winter, I don't use it, the temperature actually, at least in Estonia, and it's already pretty cold. So you can also warm it up actually. So yeah, you can
Oh,
even play it with
it's
that.
like an electric blanket without the EMFs, hopefully. And but it gives you stats as well, does it?
Yeah, so it looks at your deep sleep, REM sleep, total sleep, HRV, resting heart rate. Uh, if
Wow.
I'm not mistaken, your breath rate. That is for sure, and maybe skin temperature or body temperature as
Mm,
well.
okay. Yeah. And so you obviously mentioned that you've tried all the trackers, you've got all the trackers. Is it Oura Ring for you? Are you sort of using that fairly regularly, or are you actually just more focused on the sort of the blood work and the much more revealing biomarkers?
Mm. Yeah, I generally sleep, well. I don't have any issues with my sleep, and on a regular basis, I might just use the 8 Sleep because it like automatically is there, so you don't have to think about it, and that the temperature is what I'm going to use most of the time as well. So I'm not gonna, you know, right now I'm using the Ultra Human. I just got it a few weeks ago to test it, and my experience with it so far hasn't. I haven't like been able to make any conclusions. It's kind of synchronizing the data, and yeah, I've used the Oura Ring. I think Oura Ring is a pretty good experience. Like the UI is more user friendly than Ultrahuman, in my opinion. It's less information, so sometimes too much information can be,
Mm.
too much. So like giving just a vital few metrics is sometimes better in a lot of cases.
And the one thing we haven't mentioned is, and I know that you're sort of interested in this area, that certainly because I have got an ultra human ring, but in the interests of not being a total biohacking nerd, I don't wear both rings at once.
Mm,
And as far as I know, there's no full airplane mode on the ultra human ring, and we don't know about the
mm,
the Samsung Galaxy yet. But that's something apparently
right.
they're working on. But it's probably quite complicated to integrate.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's important though, isn't it? I mean, well, it certainly is to
Mm,
me.
for sure.
Uh, okay, well, look, let's move on to what the next thing that we wanted to talk about then, because this sort of race to beat aging is on, and I know your book's coming out very soon. Your new book's on pre-sale. Thank you for the copy, by the way. I've really been enjoying your thoughts on longevity. And over the last few weeks and months, we've covered all sorts of different conferences, longevity get-togethers with some of the world's best doctors. There's a biomarkers of aging challenge series that's just kicked off, trying to crack the code on predicting how long we live with a mortality prediction phase. I've been reading your book and I've been having a look at your biomarkers list today. What are the key markers as far as you are concerned in terms of longevity?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned a few of them at least. So we don't have like umbrella biomarker for longevity. So there are these biological age tests that look at your biological age, and we have the speed of aging test. But those tests aren't, we don't have that much data about them. We don't know if they are actually very accurate as of now. So I wouldn't use those markers. Maybe in the future, yes, we will have some like DNA methylation marker that tells the total health of your body in a single marker. But even then, you still want to know the specifics of, is it your liver, is it your kidneys, is it your metabolism, is it your hormones that is causing the issue. So even then, you never want to rely on a single marker. And like I said, the key to longevity is delaying a lot of these chronic diseases. And the biggest killer in the world in terms of chronic diseases is heart disease. So that's like the bottleneck for most people's longevity. And because the average age of a heart attack is like 64, and most people get like at least like it's predicted that like 1/3 of the people will get some sort of a heart complication or heart disease event somewhere between their 60s and the 70s. In the 70s and 80s, it's going to be more neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's. But yeah, like the biggest bottleneck is going to be heart disease. So on a yearly basis, I think it's very important to track these clinically relevant biomarkers related to heart disease. So hemoglobin A1C, inflammation, CRP, hsCRP is a best marker for that. Then from the lipid side, so ApoB is the most important let's say, particle for heart disease and plaque atherosclerosis. So cholesterol is considered like a poor man's ApoB. So cholesterol usually reflects your ApoB status, but ApoB is the kind of the driving force behind atherosclerosis. So ideally, you want to look at ApoB levels more rather than cholesterol. But if you don't, maybe your doctor doesn't want to measure ApoB, which would be a shame. But or if it's a bit more expensive, so it's maybe like a little bit more expensive than regular cholesterol, then you can use the regular cholesterol as well to kind of assess your ApoB status, but it's not always accurate. So there's like some discrepancy in about like 20-30% of the cases. But in a lot of the cases, it still kind of correlates pretty well with ApoB levels as well. Then one important biomarker that everyone needs to or would be recommended to measure once in your life is lipoprotein A, LP little a. And this is the biggest genetically determined atherosclerotic lipoprotein. And it's like 90% or like predominantly determined by genetics. And you can't really change it that much with diet. You can move it a little bit, but not a lot. And the higher your LP little a levels, the higher the risk of atherosclerosis. So this is kind of genetic luck in a lot of ways. So you can't really control it that much, but
So you
knowing it
can't
that
do anything.
sorry,
You can't do anything if it's high.
you can do it like you can move only like maybe 10% of it or something like that. So or there is some evidence that certain medications like these PCSK9 inhibitors can reduce it by about 25%, but that medication is quite expensive as well. So it's like 400 euros per month or something like that.
Okay.
But if you have, maybe your healthcare could provide it, but usually they don't want to do that. So even then, if you see your LP little a number, you can just be more aggressive with some of the other markers. So you can be more aggressive and more diligent with your hemoglobin A1C, which is your average blood sugar levels, your hsCRP, your ApoB levels, and those kind of things. So even though you might have genetically determined higher levels of LP little a, you can still be more mindful about the other markers quite well, and exercise and maintain normal healthy body weight.
Yeah. I,
For Yeah.
no, I'm just really glad that I've chatted to you today, because I went and did loads of blood tests yesterday and I've got a lot of this stuff done and I haven't done it in ages. And I basically,
Mm.
when I get the results back, I'm just going to listen back to your podcast and then check everything you've said.
Right. Yeah. For like neurodegeneration, we don't have any specific biomarkers, unfortunately. And you know, with some of the risk factors for neurodegeneration, then they're pretty similar to heart disease. So what's good for the heart is usually also good for the brain, and heart disease usually precedes neurodegeneration in the timeline of events. So you can be sure that if you're having good blood sugar management, good inflammation, and good lipids, then you're also effectively lowering the risk of neurodegeneration. The biggest genetic risk factor for neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's is the ApoE gene. So people who have the ApoE4 allele, they have a significantly higher risk of Alzheimer's, and those who have a ApoE2 allele have a much lower risk. And the individuals with the E2 alleles also have a greater longevity overall. So there is something like that actually makes them live longer than the other alleles as well. Whereas people who have the E4 allele, they have a higher risk of heart disease and Alzheimer's, unfortunately. So you can change that, but again, you can be more mindful about your diet, your other biomarkers, and exercise.
Yeah.
And lastly, an important, I guess, collection of biomarkers would be kidney markers, which I also talk about in a book. And it's not usually talked that much, like kidney disease and kidney function. But if you look at it, then the kidneys do follow age-related changes. So kidney function declines with age, and kidney dysfunction or kidney disease is also a huge risk factor for heart disease. So people who have kidney disease don't necessarily die to kidney disease. Most of them die to heart disease. And like if you're getting into the extreme or advanced ages, so into 90s and 100s, then usually that's a lot of these people have poor kidney function and they die to some aspects of kidney dysfunction. So like kidney dysfunction is almost like a disease of very old people, so to say,
Yeah.
because the older you get, the worse your organ function eventually becomes. So maintaining good kidney health is quite important, and you can like reverse kidney damage, but it's hard, and it also is very easy to prevent by looking at some of these key biomarkers for kidney function, such as EGFR. And usually, EGFR can be measured with creatinine levels or cystatin C levels, but the creatinine levels aren't like always very accurate because they can be elevated by things like muscle mass and exercise. So if you are exercising and you have slightly more muscle mass, then your creatinine levels might be high and your doctor is going to freak out. But in reality, you don't have any issues with your kidney function. So it's like a relic of this muscle and exercise. So the better marker for that is cystatin C, and a lower cystatin C, so something like 1 or below that would be kind of optimal. And cystatin C is not affected by dietary choices and muscle mass and exercise. So if you can measure your EGFR based on cystatin C, then that's the best option for kidney function. And there's, of course, some other minor biomarkers as well related to kidney function, like albumin and urea and blood urea nitrogen and those kind of things. But if you just look at EGFR and cystatin C, then you're going to pretty much get the best, like a very good overview about that.
I think, it's really interesting because we've obviously talked about tracking one's health in terms of a wearable. And now we've talked about tracking in terms of, really in-depth health testing, blood testing, and so on. And I think that one of the things that I found fascinating having a look at your book and from my own personal perspective is um, past all of this, you've then got to learn to chill out once you find out what the results actually are, because nothing's going to be perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect. And I was talking with a friend yesterday who works in the cancer space, and he was saying one of the hardest things is that when people find out they've got cancer, obviously their bodies are massively in fight or flight mode, and they need to be in the exact opposite to heal. And to a lesser extent, that's the case for all of us. I know you've written a bit about sort of optimism and a sort of optimistic personality when it comes to one's health. And that's
Mm.
actually really important. You know, when you get a bad night's sleep on your Oura ring, I feel annoyed when I see my stats, let alone when I get bad blood tests or find out that I've got one of the ApoE4 genes, which I have, not two,
Right.
but one. And that's, you know, it takes some getting over, doesn't it?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the kind of a point where ignorance is bliss. So, I think
Yeah.
it's somewhat, um, yeah, important to know what you're signing up for if you are tracking things. So I think, they don't recommend doing full body MRIs, not only because it's expensive and in most cases it doesn't tell you that much, but also if they do find something odd, then a lot of people might freak out and it could cause like some, let's say, collateral damage to your psychology in that sense. But I think, at least for me, it wouldn't matter. Like even if I get some sort of unfavorable result on a blood test or something else more serious, then at least I'm just the kind of personality that would maintain like a cool head about it.
Mm,
Of course, there are a lot of other people who would react completely differently, and I can't tell exactly how I'm going to react if someday I, two will be diagnosed with cancer or something else. So I don't know how well I
yeah.
would react, but at least my own like perception of myself and mindset is that I would be kind of rational about it and okay, I get this. So what do I do now? So how do I, maximize the healthy outcomes and minimize the risk of the worst outcomes?
Mm,
So of course, ignorance is bliss only to a certain extent because like my like my family member, he was also ignorant about his health and he got diabetes now. So yeah, there needs to be some sort of a balance. You don't want to be completely clueless and completely ignorant because then you're going to be like waking up one day and your doctor says you have this particular disease
yeah.
or whatnot. So you need to kind of find a balance for yourself. Okay, how much do you want to know? You don't need to know all the hundreds of biomarkers. You don't need to do full body MRIs and scan everything about yourself because that can make you go crazy and it can also be very expensive. So you need to figure out, okay, what's the minimal effective dose for me and what's my goals with longevity? Like, do I really want to live to 120 or am I going to try to break the longest living record in history, or am I fine with living until most people don't want to live to like 70, they prefer maybe like 80. I think that most people would answer like 80 is the good year or good age to die, but it depends on your goals.
Mm. So I was looking forward to speaking to you because I'm obviously an author as well, and I know the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into not just being an author, but being a successful author. Because a lot of it is what comes after the book comes out, and you've done really, really well with your book. This book that's coming out shortly contains 24 chapters ranging from the biology of aging to nutrition, fitness, and supplements. How's it been putting this one together?
Mm. Yeah, so this one was probably the hardest book that I've written because it's also the longest. It has like over 8,000 references. So I've been spending like 10 months uh, going through the research and writing it and, going through it several times, editing, proofreading,
Mm,
and proofreading the proofreader and,
yeah.
all those things. So it's just been a lot of work. And at the same time, I learned, a lot of valuable information about these topics. I think I'm at a point now with my knowledge where I know exactly like what's the blueprint or secret pathway to living a long and healthy life, at least in my own opinion.
Mm,
And it goes down to understanding some of these fundamentals like exercise, diet, and maybe supplements, of course, sleep and relationships, those things as well. But there's like layers to this. There's just knowing, okay, you need to move and exercise. You need to make sure you don't overeat and don't become obese. That's kind of very basic level understanding, but it kind of goes a little bit deeper. You need to figure out what's the like sweet spot based on the
mm,
research in terms of how much exercise, what type of exercise, and also just tracking a lot of these things. How do you know that you're actually healthy, and how do you know that you're in a low risk category for whatever heart disease or other types of chronic diseases? And how do you know like what to expect with the future in terms of like changes to these markers. So are you ahead of the curve with these age-related changes, or are you behind? So for example, muscle mass, low muscle mass is a risk factor for mortality, especially in the elderly people, and muscle mass declines with age. So like whatever age you're at right now, so if you're 45 or 32, whatever the age is, how do you compare to your peers, and what's your trend, what's your trajectory like right now? So because if you're right now already at the borderline sarcopenic, so borderline low muscle mass and low muscle strength, then it's going to be significant, because in 20 to 30 years you're going to be then below that threshold, and you're going to be diagnosed with sarcopenia, which increases the risk of dying to frailty and other, like hip fractures and those kind of things. So you always want to know like what's your health status and what's your like spot right now in terms of your health trajectory, and then of course knowing what to do to improve it. So if you are behind a curve with muscle mass or whatever other biomarker, then okay, what do you do to kind of get back into it?
Yeah, yeah. Now we've got you for another few minutes, so I want to ask you about this final story quickly, and then your biohacking review. According to a recent report, Gen Z and millennials are now purchasing more wellness products and services than older generations. It highlights a growing trend where younger generations prioritize health and well-being more than the oldies. But how can we get different generations working together? And I wanted to ask you about this because you posted something very sweet on Instagram, Sim, and it was about how important it is to find a health conscious partner. And you were talking about your own relationship and how important that is. So why is it so important?
Yeah, so the post was talking about building generational health. So how do you transition healthy habits and healthy, let's say, biomarkers to your offspring and your children? And your partner is obviously your partner in crime or partner in health with that. So it takes two to make babies right now, and you need to,
Right now.
or at least the best outcomes for the child is also like if there is two parent household, and you need to work as a team. And my wife, we're both quote unquote biohackers, or we're both very interested in health and longevity, and it's just so easy for us to do the healthy things. Like we can't relate to these relationships where people say like, I'm trying to eat healthy, but my partner is, sabotaging me or criticizing me for my health decisions, or they're criticizing me for buying all these supplements or criticizing me for doing all these tests. Where because we're both doing it together, and we also have very similar like sleep wake on a cycle. So we go to bed around the same time and wake up pretty much the same time. And
What time is that?
we usually like 10 p.m. I think is the average bedtime, and we wake up maybe 6 a.m. So yeah, we have very similar routines, fortunately, and it makes it so much easier. So we always have healthy food. We always have we try to plan like some physical activities together, like going to the park or doing some gym workout together. So yeah, it's just much easier to do it as a team. And the other things that I mentioned in the post are, things like maximizing your epigenetics. So some things do carry over through our epigenetics to our offspring and children. So, we might have some bad genes related to ApoE or LPA, whatever it is. It's good to know that, so you can do the gene test to know your spot. But it's very important also to just maximize the lifestyle and your own health. Because if you're like, at least like some of the studies do find that healthier parents, or unhealthier parents, like more obese or diabetic mothers especially, like they can worsen the metabolic health of the child as well. So if you want to get pregnant, then before that make sure that you're kind of going a short period of health maxing so that you're in peak health before that.
Yeah, yeah, we certainly did that. And actually, I mean, back in the day, it was probably over 6 years ago. But Dave Asprey's Better Baby book really helped us there. I remember we changed our diet quite a bit from reading that. But I thought, and it wasn't just that post. You've posted a few times around having a health conscious partner is so important to you, and I thought that was very nice, Sim. So good for you guys. Very inspiring. Now, what is your biohacking review then? What have you been sort of doing or trying recently that you thought might be helpful to talk about?
Yeah, so today I've been mostly thinking about creatine. I was like made a video about it, recorded it today, and I've been recently, like, over the past few days, I've been taking some creatine as well. And everyone knows it can help with muscle and muscle strength, but it also has a lot of benefits for the brain and cognition and memory. And the reason I've been taking it is because it has been shown to also counteract sleep loss and sleep deprivation. So I'm going to travel to India in next week. So I'm going to experience some jet lag and sleep disturbance. And they found in a lot of studies that creatine loading before a type of sleep deprivation mitigates some of the sleep loss. And because your brain uses a lot of creatine, and higher creatine levels can reduce sleep demand, so you can get away with less sleep essentially. And there's a lot of studies as well on like athletes where they experience sleep deprivation and they take like even like 20 grams of creatine, and that maintains their physical performance and coordination, so they're still able to perform at a higher level. So I've just noticed that over the past 2 days or something when I've been taking creatine, the I guess yeah, I'm just noticing that I'm waking up much refreshed and with less like sleep demand.
Very interesting. Well, I mean, I remember back in the day, probably 20 years ago, taking creatine to try and help my guns get bigger because
Mm.
you were talking about muscle mass earlier on. And I mean, I work so hard in the gym, but it is hard. Some of us ectomorphs struggle to put on weight.
Mm.
And I realize that's a complaint that's really annoying for people who struggle to lose weight. But when I took creatine, I found that I got quite dehydrated. Is
Mm.
that a thing?
Um, it might be that you're just storing more water in the muscles. So creatine
Mm,
has that water retention effect, but it retains the water in the muscles. And yeah, like it actually may help with fat loss as well. But the key here is that creatine usually works only if you combine it with resistance training. So it doesn't improve bone density if you don't do resistance training, and it like marginally increases maybe muscle size if you don't do resistance training. So the best way to get the effects from creatine is to do some form of resistance training while you're at it. And yeah, drinking more water might enhance some of the water retention effects as well, so that you're, because yeah, it makes you look more full and bigger because the creatine makes you hold the water in the muscles.
mm. And then you've been feeling more alert when you wake up in the morning. And I guess the real test is going to be when you get to India and
Right.
the time that you spend there.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm gonna do some other hacks as well. So I'm gonna try to sleep mostly on the plane to make the time go faster. But yeah, we'll see. Like I also will probably use like some melatonin and use blue blocking glasses, and yet try to, because the time zone difference between Estonia and India isn't that large. So it's like 4 hours, 4.5 hours. So yeah, I'm gonna go to bed around the same time actually when I arrive in India. So
Yeah.
it's not gonna change my sleep rhythm that much.
Very good. I use the human charger for you probably heard of the human charger, have you?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was like
shines
old.
light into the ear. And I mean they're still going, I think, but it's been around for years and years. And I tried it on a trip to Puerto Rico, quite a long flight, only about a 5 hour time difference though. And I thought it was great. The only issue is that you have to put it in every 2 hours when you get there. So I was out in a bar in Puerto Rico having a couple of drinks and having to put these earphones in while I was doing it, shining weird lights into my ears. But these are the sacrifices that we make for biohacking.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're not tempted to try the human charger on your flight as well?
Um, I do have it from back from the day. I don't know if I still have it somewhere, but yeah, I think probably just looking at the lights themselves might work equally as good.
Yeah, yeah,
Probably like I'm just gonna go outside when the sun comes out, so that's gonna be the
mm,
most powerful signal
yeah,
for
yeah.
the circadian rhythm.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna get back in touch with you next week or a couple of weeks time and find out how it goes in terms of the Indian jet lag.
Sounds good.
Um, and look, it's so great to talk to you. Obviously, the book's on pre-sale now. Where can people find that and everything else that you talk about and do?
Yeah, so the book is available at thelongevityleap.com, and I am Seamland on all the social media platforms.
Yeah, really encourage people to get the book, and it's on pre-release now, and then it comes out in September. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's gonna be people get their hands on it in September. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's gonna be shipped before that.
Brilliant stuff. It's very, very nice to meet you, and I hope we can meet in person at some point. Thanks, Sim,
Yeah,
for all
sounds
the
good.
knowledge. And as I say, I'm gonna, and I'm sure other people will do this as well. I'm gonna get my blood tests back, and then I'm gonna listen back over this and compare all those tests to what you've said.
Yeah, well, you can just read the book. I outline all the like optimal reference ranges for these like 50, 60 biomarkers as well. So you can just, what does the study say for the lowest risk?
That's fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. All right, Sim, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for everyone who's been watching the live stream. Obviously, this podcast will be out soon, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.